It makes me think of the Immanuel Kant quote that I always appreciate. It's a little harsh, but I think it's if the truth shall kill them, let them die. And that's probably a little harsh, but I think the spirit of it is like the truth is the truth. Like there's no point hiding from it. There's no point sugar like figure out what it is and then figure out what you need to do. And just to give a quick personal story for me, why this resonates with me, and I think it's useful again for people to hear it in real terms. So I've talked about this before on the show, but my wife has multiple sclerosis, and we have a son who's 8 years old, and it's gotten pretty severe for her. And there was a period
Mm,
of time, probably a few years ago, where as like our life shifted and it became much more of like caregiving and taking care, and our relationship shifted, and we had a son, and there was all these things. Very much as you're saying, like I found myself angry and frustrated and all those things. And it wasn't until I kind of went through the process exactly as you're laying it out, and probably didn't do it perfectly, where I eventually got to ask myself the question to say, to be true, like, can I stay? Like, is it possible for me to stay here and be happy? Am I a good enough person, whatever it is, to do these things?
yeah.
And that's probably not the right question, but there was a fear of asking that question of like, maybe this is too hard. Maybe I'm never going to be okay with this lifestyle. But it was only once I asked that question that I was able to figure out a way to be a part of it. And I think that's an illustration of what you're saying of like how that becomes very real and how you have to do that work. And it doesn't have to be as scary as it seems like, oh, if the answer I don't like is because we can change, we can evolve, we can figure out things to do. There are people that can help us. All those things come into it, but that resonates with me really deeply as
Yeah.
you're saying it.
That's a brilliant example. Really, really powerful example. And of course, it's that typical fear of the unknown. But the reality is you are living a life that might not be true to your heart and soul. And so it's tough already.
Mhm. And it's hurting
Imagine
my
if you,
wife and my son.
right?
Not it's not doing anybody any favors. Yeah.
Absolutely, right? So be like I say, be in the room
Mm,
when you're in the room, be in the room for yourself when you're in the room,
mhm,
right? And what would you say to a best friend?
mm.
And why don't we do that for ourselves, right?
Yeah, I find
So
that with my
yeah.
son. What the things that he's my version of that. Not that I don't have friends. I promise I do. But
Yep.
as I like see my son in situations and I say, "Here's the advice I would give you," I can't help but think to myself, like, "Am I following that
Yeah,
advice? Is that what I'm
yeah.
doing?" And that's such a useful tool. Such a useful
Right?
tool. Yeah,
Totally,
yeah.
totally. Yeah, totally. I think
So
it's really I was just gonna say, I think it's
yeah, yeah, please.
really important to be okay with love of self.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people don't feel that it's an okay thing or that
Why do you
it's
think that
too
is?
hard.
Is it
I,
we think we don't
because
deserve it?
we've been promoted to the more you give to others, the better you are, right? The better person you are, the more you volunteer, the more you support other people, the more that you can do as a parent, right? Look at them. Wow.
That's the
Right? That
yardstick.
whole external stuff.
Yeah.
Now we've come through some really tough times as a world.
Mm.
And there's been a lot of things that have rolled out of that, some good, some not so good. But it's been a wake up call for some of us to go, hey, wait a minute, life is short.
Mm.
So
Well,
what do I want to do here? Yeah.
let me go philosophical again, because that makes me think of a question of, why did we evolve over the course of history? I think you're explaining what happened, right? Of like life got busy, we started all these external factors. I'm sure our consciousness and our ability to think more
Yeah.
hurt us because of all the thinking. But why, right? Is there a fundamental question here which says, what do we actually care more about as a human race and society? Do we care more about progression, growth, creating things, developing new things? Or do we care more about love of self and peace and comfort? Because you could see somebody looking at it and saying, well, the reason we evolved to a place where we are today, where we almost have to undo all of this and help people figure out how to love themselves, is because we've optimized for productivity. We've optimized for building amazing things, innovating, creating new technologies. And that's great. There's lots of good things in that, but it becomes somewhat of a binary choice where you can optimize for that and be where we are, and then people have the anxiety and the depression and the lack of self-love
Hmm.
that we have. Or you can go the other way and have that. It's not that you can't create things then, but it's not going to be at the same optimal level, the same effectiveness. Maybe that's one of those inconvenient truths, maybe it's not. But is that, if you think about it philosophically, is that true? Do we kind of have to pick one to optimize for over the other and be okay with the trade-offs?
Um, it, it's such a big nut, right? Like so hard to crack because we're so far along the train
Mm,
of immediacy, and this is what I can pay for it, I can buy it, I'm going to feel happier because I can go out and go to the island and just sit in the sun for a week, and that's okay, I'm going to feel good, and then I go back to work and I feel like crap
mhm,
after
mhm.
6 weeks, right? Whatever. So I don't know that we can get off that train, but I think what we need to do is add the part that has been missing for so long, which is that internal connection. And you, as an individual, start making choices that resonate for your true being, that will start to shift
Mm,
if we can all get to that level. So I think probably a mix of both, simply because we're in so far and so deep. Unfortunately, it's a big money pit, right?
right,
Really, when we
right.
think of it. And so that, to me, breaks it right off in terms of I don't know, just so much energy spent around
Yes.
that. Um, and then we're like sucked into that tornado.
There you
So
go.
how are you going to, right? How are you
Well,
going to keep yourself safe from that?
is the great
So
resignation, as it's being called today, you could look at that and maybe say that some of this playing out at a macro level, where a lot of people, because of COVID, because of social issues, because of a lot of things, more time at home thinking by ourselves, they've
yeah,
started to realize that thing that's missing, and they're starting to bring it back. And I would argue, I think a lot of people would agree, a lot of people that have left their jobs or the great resignation is because of that realization and saying, I can't be what I want to be in that context. And I think that's a good illustration because I think it illustrates that, but it also highlights the cost of it, if you want to call it a cost of,
yeah,
well, now companies can't run as efficiently. Now, whatever it is. And that gets to that trade-off. So like, how do you view it? Is there a trade-off, firstly, to embracing what you're saying? And if so, are we okay with it? Are we okay with the things we might lose or give up so that we can achieve love of self at a kind of at scale?